Hi everyone, this is lecture 25 on nutrition. In the previous lectures we did the digestive system and we saw how the different organic molecules such as proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids are digested and absorbed. However, we didn't talk too much about the nutritional value of these uh, uh, molecules that we eat. So in this lecture we talk a little bit about the characteristics and what is required for the body for proper nutrition. So first of all, we're going to begin with some basic definitions. And these lectures will then set the groundwork for the next several lectures. So we'll talk about metabolism, basal metabolic rate. We'll talk about the essential amino acids and fatty acids. We'll talk about the minerals and their functions. And we'll introduce the vitamins and how they can be divided between the fat and water soluble vitamins. So let's begin. A nutrient is a molecule obtained from food that is required for metabolic processes. And remember, metabolism is the sum of all the body's chemical reactions. And so these metabolic processes use the nutrients we take in our diet to produce ATP. And this which will supply the energy for our cells of the body. So a calorie is the energy content of food. You've heard this used in the news and on the side of probably every package of food you eat. It's defined as the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So 1 calorie is equal to the heat that's used to raise a gram of water 1 degree Celsius. Now, when we speak about in human diet, we use it to capitalize form calorie, so the big C. And this refers to kilocalorie. And if you remember from SCB 203 lab, kilo is 1,000. So this is equivalent to 1,000 calories. And it's defined as the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So notice the difference between little calorie with little c and calorie with big C. Now, nutrients can be divided into two groups. We have what are called macronutrients and micronutrients. Macro and micro refer to how much we need in our proper diet. So those substances that we need in our diet in large amounts are called macronutrients, and those molecules that we need in small amounts are called micronutrients. So a macronutrient, as its name, forms the bulk of our diet and is required in larger amounts. And these include proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, all the organic molecules that we talked about earlier. So here we have the macronutrients in the left column, and we have the micronutrients on the right column. So things like water, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins constitute the macronutrients. Your textbook doesn't include water as a macronutrient, but I put it here because other textbooks do. So we'll just assume it is as well, because water is required for life. The micronutrients include such things as minerals and vitamins. And this is just a recommended daily allowances for the different nutrients. Okay, so we need at least several liters of water. Okay, and we saw in the last lecture, or one of the last lectures, that a lot of the water that enters our digestive system comes from secretions. Only about a couple of liters is required in our diet. Notice the macromolecules are in grams. Okay, the micronutrients are in sub-milligrams. And so this table just shows some examples of where we can obtain the different classes of organic molecules. So carbohydrates you can get from fruits, rice, pasta, meat, and vegetables, and it should constitute about 50% of our diet. Lipids come from meats, dairy, and plant oils, and less than a third of our caloric intake. And proteins come from meats, nuts, legumes, seeds, and dairy products, and less than a third of our caloric intake. Now, micronutrients are required in much smaller amounts. And they're not used for fuel, but they're important in physiologic processes. So some metabolic reactions, to work optimally or to work at all, they will require vitamins and minerals. And so here are micronutrients. That includes the minerals and vitamins. Now, vitamins are organic compounds required for body functions. There are 13 known vitamins, and you can classify them as water-soluble or fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are easy to remember because there's only 4 of them: vitamin A, D, E, and K. We mentioned these in a previous lecture. And many of you know your vitamins by their abbreviation, but here we have the full names as well. So now you have to remember the abbreviation as well as the full name, and whether it's a water-soluble vitamin or a fat-soluble vitamin. Okay, so most of you know that ascorbic acid is vitamin C. Okay, and here's a table showing all the different vitamins as summarized, but you're not required to know everything in the table. Now, the other micronutrient are minerals, and it's any element other than carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen that are required by living organisms. Okay, and so these you find in just about everything: fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and meats. Okay, so you find minerals in many different types of food. We can divide minerals into the major and trace minerals. Major ones we need in larger amounts, and trace ones are in very small amounts. Okay, so most of the major minerals you're familiar with, like calcium, phosphorus, sodium, chloride, magnesium, potassium ions, and sulfur. Okay. The trace ones, if you take a 1-a-day vitamin, if you look on the side, most of these will be listed. Okay, and so these abbreviations you should know what their name. Okay, some of these you already know, such as iron, you know, iodine, you know, for example. Okay, and so here's the table of the summary of the minerals. If you want more information, we have what are called essential nutrients. These are the nutrients the body is unable to produce, so we need to obtain them in our diet. And so these include certain amino acids, certain fatty acids. Most vitamins and all minerals are considered essential nutrients because these are the ones that we need in our diet because the body cannot make them itself. So let's look at the essential and non-essential amino acids. Okay, the essential amino acids are histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. The non-essential amino acids we still need, but the body can synthesize them by converting one amino acid to another. Okay, so this is kind of hard because there are almost equal amounts in the essential and non-essential amino acids. We also have the essential fatty acids. So some examples are linoleic acid that we can obtain from plant material, linolenic acid from plants and fish, and both are essential fatty acids. Coincidentally, both are polyunsaturated fats. Do you remember what this means? Being something that's polyunsaturated? Well, that means they have 2 or more double bonds. And so when you have a double bond in a fat, that means that it has 2 less hydrogens. It also puts a bend in the molecule. Metabolism. Metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions in the body. I think you learned this on lecture 1 of SCB 203. Okay. Now, metabolism occurs through a series of enzyme-catalyzed reactions called metabolic pathways. And you have many different metabolic pathways in our metabolism of the human body. But we can divide metabolism into 2 general types of reactions, which you probably learned in SCB 203. This is catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism is the breakdown of macromolecules into the simple molecules like glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids to produce ATP. So it's breaking down macromolecules into the smallest or the simplest subunits to make ATP. Anabolins is the opposite, is where smaller molecules are combined to make a larger molecule. Okay. Another way we could define metabolism or categorize metabolism is through how energy is released or required for the reactions. So we have exergonic reactions and we have endergonic reactions. Exergonic reactions release energy. Endergonic reactions require energy to proceed. Okay, so one releases energy and one you need to put energy into the system. Another type of set of reactions in our metabolisms that are very important, which you should understand for all the subsequent lectures, are oxidative reduction reactions. Okay, because this is how a cell uses chemical energy and nutrients for ATP synthesis in these type of reactions. Okay. In oxidative reduction reactions, as you might anticipate, substances are oxidized in which they lose electrons. Alternatively, they can be reduced in which they gain electrons. Okay, so one way to easily to remember this is that oxidation is the loss of electrons. So it abbreviates oil. And reduction is the gain of electrons. So this is Rig. So you have oil and Rig. And this is how you can remember oxidation and reduction, because it's very easy to get them confused. Oxidation is the loss of electrons. Reduction is the gain of electrons. And one cannot require you can't have one without the other. If something's being oxidized, something's going to be reduced. Another important concept that we're going to be talking about in later lectures are the electron carriers. Now, these electrons that are lost or gained, they're usually bound to what are called electron carriers that have a high affinity for these electrons, and then they shuttle them to different parts of the cell. And what we're going to find is that these electron carriers generates electromotive force used by the cell to do work, and so these electrons are going to be gathered up, and then they're going to be used to create energy to produce ATP. So most electron carriers are integral and perform proteins in the mitochondrial membranes. Okay. Now, there are two major types of electron carriers in the cytosol and the mitochondrial matrix, and they have kind of long names, but we often refer to them by their abbreviations. We have nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NAD, and flavine adenine dinucleotide, or FAD. And these are the first ones to accept electrons from the nutrients during catabolism. So as the proteins, the lipids, and carbohydrates are broken down, electrons are taken from them, and they're bound to the electron carriers. And these electron carriers then have these high energy bonds that are going to carry them to the mitochondria to eventually make ATP. Okay. So here we have an example of NAD that's accepting electrons to become ADH, so it reduces. Here we have NADH that can lose electrons, and it's oxidized. Okay, so the reactions can go either way. It can be reduced or oxidized. So during catabolism, though, it's going to gain electrons, and it's going to act as a shuttle to shuttle these electrons. Okay. Now, these electrons are carried by adding hydrogen atoms. So that's the way the electrons are carried. So that's why NAD plus becomes NADH. Since it gained an electron, it loses the positive charge. FAD takes on two hydrogen atoms. So it becomes FADH2. And we're going to talk more about these in the next lecture. We have also what's called the metabolic rate. It's the total amount of energy used by the body to drive all processes. Okay, so some people have a very high metabolic rate and they produce a lot of ATP. Others have much lower metabolic rate. Now, the metabolic rate is expressed in calories, which is measured in kilocalories, as we said at the beginning of the lecture. But it's a very inefficient system because a lot of the energy is lost, and it's lost as heat. But for us, as being warm-blooded organisms, that's nice because this keeps us warm. And so the conversion of the lost heat is thermogenesis. But also means we have to eat a lot. We also have what's called the basal metabolic rate. BMR is the minimal rate of metabolism for an awake individual. They're still not doing anything. And that's how much energy is being used. Okay, so here's a table showing the basal metabolic rate of an average male and female in calories. And this is doing different activities. Normally it's done at resting, but you can also measure the calories expended at different activities. And of course, the more active the energy activity, the more energy is going to be used. Another way of measuring metabolism is what's called the body mass index, or BMI. Okay, many healthcare providers and nutritionists use the BMI. BMI is calculated as the weight in kilograms over your height in meters squared. And we can make some estimations using that once you know your BMI. So if you're underweight, if you're under 18, if you're normal weight, if you have your BMI around 18 to 25, overweight's higher than 25, and obese is over 30. Okay. So this lecture, although short, it sets the groundwork for the next lectures. And a lot of these concepts we're going to be coming back to again. Okay, so that's it for lecture 25.